is Griffin.
My tummy hurts. Pretty good, right back.
Hey, good evening, guys, or good afternoon, or whatever time frame you're in. It's Nick with Off the Chart Trading. Going to do tonight's nightly video, for Tuesday, November 2nd. Actually, let's start on this screen. Take a look at the internal screen. So, what I want to do tonight, because this is the first video I'm doing for YouTube, and we're going to get in the habit of doing this every night during the week, and it'll be one of us alternating every day, so you get different inputs and different setups. Brett did it last night, now I'm doing it. He uses E-Trade, I use Thinkorswim, and obviously different opinions, so I think it's good to not just have one person do it every single night. So kind of alternate between us and get different opinions. Ed's going to do it tonight, so should be helpful for people, especially if you don't know how we trade, what we look at, what our group's about. We'll also put in the link in the description below our Facebook group, because that's kind of where we're at. And then we also have our site for offthecharttrading.com. But feel free, if you guys have a Facebook, to come check us out. But anyway, let's just jump right into it. So today was pretty mute. I talked about it in the room today, that nothing too crazy one way or the other. We had some decent buying, as you can see in the NQ, specifically in tech today was pretty strong. There was some follow through with the ES, and Russell was pretty weak this morning and then picked up towards the close, and then same thing with the Dow and the Sunset, just kind of trending up ever since the open. Now, one thing I did make a comment about, for you the guys that know about the ticks and stuff, we didn't have a single plus 600 or a negative 600. So to me, that's a pretty neutral, I don't want to say boring day, but there wasn't really much excitement on one side or the other when it comes to the game of tug of war. So that was something that was, a nuance, if you will, or something to carry forward into tomorrow, was the fact that there was no extreme action one way or the other. And the only thing I can think of, the reason why, not to mention being at all-time highs is a good one, and hitting more all-time highs as we, close on the day. But one thing to keep in mind is that tomorrow is FOMC, and I think it's going to be potentially the biggest one of the year, because I have a feeling, this is just my opinion, that tomorrow when he speaks, which I believe is roughly 2:30, I'm sure we get the Fed minutes or whatever at 2, and then he'll talk at 2:30. But regardless, through all that, I think it's going to go from sometime in the future to probably hard dates. If they are really going to stick to their plan, then I wouldn't be shocked if we end up seeing tapering as early as next month. Now, when people think of tapering, they just assume that means that there's interest rate increases and all that kind of stuff. That I don't think they're going to be doing for at least a year or so. But keep in mind, if let's just, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but let's just say they're buying 100 billion a month in bonds, maybe they make it 90 billion or 80 billion going forward. So it's just, slowly pulling back on their purchasing and so forth. So I personally think a lot of that's already factored in, but there could be a curveball. Maybe they do end up saying something that no one really saw coming, or, the minority of people saw coming. And then that is potentially something that could cause us to pull back. So I think the market is in a hurry up and wait until tomorrow, just to see which way we end up going. So overall, fairly solid day. I know some people traded car. For you guys that didn't see, that stock went up like 200 something percent, which was kind of crazy. We had some members that took some options in that early, because Brett didn't mention that one early. It's just one of those things that no one really, it's all hindsight. You can look back on a chart and be like, oh shoot, the stock went from 100 and something dollars to 500. That's great, but that's not the norm. But we did have a few members that were able to capitalize on that. I think Joe, shout out to Joe, ended up making, I think, like $7,000 off of $1,000 bet. So that was pretty nice. I personally am not a huge fan of those types of moves. I like the slow and steady. Not that I don't play them. It's just, for me personally, I'd rather feel that there's a little more control and it's not so volatile And it depends on the market too, because if the markets are overall volatile, I do prefer trading futures. But anyway, one thing I've been talking about too is to keep an eye on the put call ratio. Put call ratio has been dropping in the morning and then slowly picking up today, but that number has progressively gotten lower. I think we opened up at like 0.35. My rule of thumb for the put call ratio is anything below 0.40 is just picture like, your speedometer in a sense. The middle is kind of like 0.6, 0.5, somewhere in that range. Anything above 0.8 is I would consider fairly bearish. That means a lot of people on the spectrum of trading are leaning more bearish, and then if it's below 0.40, that a lot of people are bullish this market. And as that number slowly goes lower and lower and lower, it is probably safe to say that it's good to take profits, potentially put on a hedge against some of your other positions. But that's just something to keep an eye on. The screen, once again, it's tough for me because this is the first video. Two reasons. One, I decided to do a juice cleanse today, so I have not eaten anything in over 24 hours. So that has been a fun experience, my first ever. So if it sounds like I'm rambling and delirious, normally that is the case, but probably a little more than usual. So please bear with me. Probably until tomorrow night. Actually, no, I guess it's Thursday morning. Maybe I'll be back to normal. But yeah, definitely something new, and my body is adjusting to it because it's the first time I've ever done anything like this. So it's kind of like my head's pounding and I feel lightheaded. But anyway, back to trading. It's just keeping an eye on all this stuff. And what I look at during the day, this screen, and that's why I wanted to switch to it, is to me the most important screen that I look at. And it is my internal screen, where I have, the vol spread, breadth ratios, the tick, trend. Not all of them are considered internals, but I just call it my internal screen. I also have, as you can see, the Dow futures, the NQ, the Russell, and the ES, and follow those throughout the day. I prefer looking at the futures, mainly because as I'm recording this, they're going. So I look at the SPY, but if I'm going to take a trade, I'll trade the SPY, or specifically the ES if it's a futures trade. Or NQ. Today I did make a quick, I think 220, 240, almost right out of the gate. Sold a little early, but I typically do that with futures. I try to get the quicker, I don't say guaranteed money, but easier money. So that was really nice this morning, just to catch that nice pop and be able to capitalize on that. I don't know anybody who would frown upon making $220 in a matter of 30 seconds, if it was even that. I felt like I called out in the room and it was like, all right, I'm in and I'm out. But that was a good trade. I know some people took the Q calls and did fairly well, but early in the morning you could tell that there was a lot more money flowing into tech, the bigger names, NQ specifically, and quite the opposite. The Russell dropped this morning, which, if you guys follow the market on a daily basis, it was completely inverse yesterday, where the Russell was leading the way, and NQ and other things were sideways to down under pressure. So kind of a 180 from yesterday. And then it kind of balanced out into the close, as you guys can see. But overall, pretty solid day. I didn't really take anything too new as far as that's concerned. I think I got out of my PayPal trade that wasn't working. But other than that, the excitement with car and some other stuff, some people were able to make some money there, and obviously some other day trades throughout the day. We can take a look at my ETF screen real quick. This is another screen I use, probably the second most important thing. The way I trade is like a top-down approach. I like to start at the top, whether you think of it like from a satellite, and then each layer you get closer and closer until your feet actually hit the ground. That's normally how I find trades. So I made a comment, a couple minutes ago, NQ was strong, tech was strong. Well, to get those gears, turning, well, what's tech? Semiconductors and XLK and those names. And you can see right out of the gate, both of those, and even throughout most of the day, a little pullback midday, which is common. But overall, both of these, I think, hitting all-time highs for their, respective sectors in these ETFs. SMH, when I think of SMH, I think of AMD and NVIDIA, Taiwan Semi, Micron, all those types of names, Intel, whatever the case. You can scroll through them and find which ones are moving. Typically for the room, the go-tos are going to be AMD and NVIDIA. But, throughout the day, those were fairly solid moves. And then also XLK. So when I think of XLK, Microsoft, Apple, and so forth. So when you have a morning where, the first 20, 30 minutes, you can see a big flow of money going into, a specific sector and specific bigger names, it's a little easier to gauge throughout the day. Because you can normally see if money's flowing into Microsoft or Apple or NVIDIA or any of those bigger names, it's going to stay. I'm one of those people, I'd rather get in at, say, 9:35 and be out at 10 just to capitalize on that move. Once again, selling into strength. But sometimes it's nice to see those moves follow through. And I know a lot of people have been trading those in the room. Healthcare also did fairly well and they kind of sold off. I personally have a short on XLY. For you guys that don't know, XLY is a big holding discretionary for Amazon, Tesla, McDonald's. I was about to say McDonald's, Nike, and so forth. I'm mainly in there, one, because I can't. It's a sin to short Tesla, but I feel like it's a little cleaner if I do it via the XLY. And then also Amazon has not actually looked that great, to be honest. So two things. One, Tesla's almost gone up freaking 40-50% in a matter of 3 months, which we called that breakout right after the last earnings. And then also Amazon not looking too good. So those two alone, I think, make up about roughly 40% of the XLY. So my head at all-time highs, which they hit basically the end of yesterday, I thought that would be a good short. And XLY did end up finishing down. It didn't continue its bleed, but I'm holding on to that into tomorrow as well. Just, I'm 95% long, so I think it is always good to have some type of short exposure just in case something happens. And if we do end up seeing something that could be market, making and moving, market moving in general, I think it's important to have some type of hedge on before the event, not after the fact, because typically when you do end up seeing aggressive selling, you're almost like deer in the headlights. Like, is this something to buy? Is there going to be more? So that's just something for me that since Tesla's gone so far and Amazon has not looked that hot, I'd rather short the XLY, just buying directional puts and seeing how that works out. But yeah, anyway, so during the day I'll try to look at the internal screen and then see what my ETFs are doing. Is there anything specific? Is it noticeable? Or some bleeding and some ripping? So I typically see over 5-day period, because you can kind of see a trend. You don't really need anything special. You don't need to draw trend lines or anything. You can clearly see that XLK in general, tech, has been slowly climbing higher. You can see industrials from those lows kind of slowly climbing back up. So keep an eye on Boeing tomorrow, or Caterpillar, or any of those other big names. Sometimes it's good to see what the ETFs are doing and having a plan. So when the next day does happen, you really don't have to worry about what's the next trade or what's the scanner say. Well, you can see where the money's flowing, and you just follow the money. I always think of yourself as the remora fish, or remoria fish, or whatever it's called, under a shark. You don't need to be the shark. You don't need to be the biggest and strongest. Just know your role and follow the stream, and typically you'll do fairly well. So at least that's how I look at it. Materials doing pretty good in the close. Just noticing that as well. Retail, it's overall solid day, just pretty light. One other thing I look at is this going to switch? Why are you not switching? There we go. I had to click back on it. Is market profile. I don't feel a lot of people talk about market profile, especially on YouTube. There's really not that much information about it. It was something that interested me a few years ago, and I finally pulled the trigger and added it to my workspace just coming up on about a year ago. So by no means am I an expert. But I have found some pretty important levels as far as seeing, the TPOs for time and VPOC, and just seeing how they play together. So throughout the day, this has been pretty helpful software. I talk about halfback, which is that gold bar. And we can just look at today's profile, and it's pretty bullish. Almost like that P formation where you have the open, you drop a little bit. That doesn't look right. So let me, where are you? Request tick data. I'm just curious to see how much volume was traded in the lower part in the morning. There you go. So yeah, so you can see 213 contracts at the lows. That's not much. That little green circle's where we opened, and we dropped a little bit and then came right back up. And then we spent the vast majority of the day at the upper range. And the thing I love about market profile is if you have a candle chart, you're looking at a candlestick chart and you spend 95% of the day at the upper end, or you're trading sideways, and then you see selling towards the last, I guess it depends on the time frame, but we'll just say a daily chart. We end up seeing some selling. That candle's going to look horrible, typically speaking. Whereas for the profile, you can see that the most value, where was time spent, where was volume, where was the most contracts being, traded, and you can see it's all up here. So when you zoom out, you can see that it was building out up here. The most time was spent at 46, 20, 25. The most volume was 46, 21. And the other thing I always talk about is when I think of halfback, which is that gold bar right there, is who's winning right now. Think of it as a game, either a Squid Games, or the Bulls or the Bears on one side, and who's pulling who. And you can see throughout the entire day, where do we spend the most time? Each letter is 30 minutes. Even if you don't really know what you're looking at right now, you can clearly see there's a lot more up here than there is below halfback. So that is something that I like to pay attention to, and I would consider this an overall bullish day. Even if it was flipped and we sold selling into, we did see some selling into the close, I would consider, still consider it a fairly bullish day because of how this built out, and we'll see how it is over. Overnight inventory right now is building out, and it's within this range. The red part is where 30% of all volume was traded. That's how I set it up, just to visually see where volume is and where contracts are being traded. So a helpful tool. We talk about market profile in the room. I showed you my ETF screen, my internal screen. I got another 3 screens, but I don't want to be here all night talking about everything. If you're interested, like I said, join our Facebook group. I'll put the link to the room. Oh, not the room, but the group itself in the description, so you guys can check us out. Like I said, it's a lot to go over in a very short period amount of time. But just kind of recapping today, that it was pretty quiet. Like I said, we had that initial little burst, that first 30 to 45 minutes of the day, first hour or so, and then trading sideways for the most part. You can see that in the profile, and you can see that on really any kind of candlesticks or bar chart or whatever you use. And I think it's just hurry up and wait in anticipation until tomorrow. So we'll just have to see how it goes. Like I said, you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can go to offthetcharttrading.com, support at offthetcharttrading.com, and send us an email. And we'd be more than happy to help you guys. Hopefully it's been helpful, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.